The major call out amongst both carriers is that we are seeing a continued trend towards dynamic pricing. This is not something that is going to go away. I expect it to move more towards a quarterly basis that we see these kinds of changes, whether it's related to fuel, whether it's related to zip codes and DAS, whether it's related to just how they're defining certain surcharges. Hey there, shippers, and welcome back to another video where we talk about all things parcel shipping. Today we're diving into some key changes that UPS and FedEx announced late last week that are set to hit us on June 2nd of this year. For context, late last week, both FedEx and UPS, and I should really reverse those because UPS announced first, but both carriers announced changes to their pricing and how they're structuring their programs as we go forward. The important call out here is that we're viewing this as a broader movement by both carriers to move towards dynamic pricing. We're seeing a lot of questions from customers, and so I wanted to call to attention what these changes are and what you should be paying attention to as they kind of play into the market. So we'll start chronologically since UPS announced first. We'll start with those changes, and then we'll move over to FedEx. They announced a much more limited change, but we'll cover that as well. So starting with UPS, the first thing that shippers should take note of are going to be the zone adjustments. So starting on June 2nd, UPS is reassigning certain zip codes to new zones. Unfortunately, they haven't really announced what these are going to be. That's true to form really for UPS, but we can take note of what's happened historically. So UPS did this exercise back in March of this year. And what we saw as a company, Reveel and my team specifically, really saw modest increases to pricing. And when I say modest, I mean very, very slight program increases. So I don't expect the new changes from UPS to be that significant. I could be mistaken on this, but just historically speaking, they haven't been significant increases related to zone adjustments. What I recommend to shippers, as we start getting closer to that June 2nd deadline, pay attention to your average zone. This can be found in a Reveel dashboard. You may be tracking it internally, but pay attention to how that fluctuates over the next few weeks. After June 2nd, if you're seeing a significant bump to that, that could indicate that you are being impacted more dramatically than, say, what the norm would be with that charge, and you may need to act accordingly. That would be my recommendation. It's something to keep an eye on as we go forward. I believe this will be the last change this year on zone, but again, we're seeing some really unprecedented movements from both UPS and FedEx in terms of the frequency of the changes to their networks. So keep an eye on it. The next change that we want to be talking about are going to be the surcharge increases that are going to impact really the usual suspects for UPS, which are the undesirable, large, bulky packages that really are inefficient from a revenue perspective for their program. So UPS made the announcement that additional handling and large package shipments that are going to be going to Zone 7 Plus are going to be receiving an increase in cost. Now, I expect this is mostly going to impact shippers on the West Coast and the East Coast. We see a lot of California shippers, especially if they're shipping large and bulky packages over to the East Coast and vice versa. They're the ones that are going to be the most hit by these charges. But a quick rundown of what those are. Additional handling weight is going to be increasing to $55. Additional handling dimension charges are going to be increasing to $38. Additional handling packaging, and this gets redundant, will be increasing to $31.50, and large package surcharges, if it's a commercial package, will be increasing to $260. If it's a residential package, it will be increasing to $305. This isn't entirely unexpected from UPS. It really just brings them in line with what FedEx announced at the beginning of this year. My guess is that UPS looked at it, said, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. We're going to implement the same. But again, this is going to impact programs that are largely shipping those big, heavy, bulky packages. And if you're in those, in that situation where you're receiving a lot of these charges, you may want to consider doing a package evaluation. Even shaving a few inches off can really help mitigate some of the costs of these packages. That's not always the case. So the other option that a lot of shippers may have outside of negotiation would be trying to reroute these via an LTL shipment or get it to a node that is closer to the end customer. So take a look at what the options are available to you, what makes most sense for your shipping program, and that'll really be the guiding principle there. The next up item, it's not specific to Zone 7, but it also is receiving an increase, and a pretty big one at that, is going to be the Overmaximum fees. These are the really, really large packages that go into a program. And that fee is going to be increasing from $13.25 per shipment to $17.75 per shipment. For context, this fee was only about $8.75 back in 2020. At the time, it was thought to be really expensive. So the fact that we're seeing this increase occurring over time, we're seeing this inflation of rates, is broadcasting loud and clear that UPS really does not want these packages. So again, if you are shipping a lot of overmax shipments, if you're seeing a lot of costs associated with it, expect that to increase by about 34% relative to whatever you're paying today. And again, if you're shipping those packages, consider moving it to an alternative carrier, whether that's in a parcel space or whether that is in an LTL. Really just consider a different home for that because UPS and FedEx are both going to be really pricing these out of the market because they do not want these packages in their networks. The last item that I'm going to really be bringing up on this call are going to be shipping charge corrections. So UPS is really updating how it's handling shipping charge corrections. And just as a reminder, these are the charges that are incurred when inaccurate data is given over to UPS. Things like dimensions, things like weight, all of that is really considered in these charges. And if enough occurrences happen per invoice, you're going to be assessed the greater of 165 per occurrence or 12% of the total correction charge. That 12% just increased from 8% prior to June 2nd of this year. So that's really what the change is. Now, these are really tricky charges to track, but what you want to be paying attention to with these, when we did our initial analysis, what we're finding is that it's not necessarily impacting the shippers that have a lot of these charges. What it's impacting are the shippers that actually get these charges correct. They're handing largely accurate data over to UPS and really only receive a few occurrences per shipment. So instead of paying the 165 on, a handful of shipments, they're paying 12% of that total correction charge, which is really upping the revenue there. So if you find yourself receiving a lot of shipping charge correction fees in your data, you're likely going to be seeing a 50% increase because, again, it's not a 4% increase from 8 to 12%. That is really just increasing 50% of what that value is. So keep an eye out for those shipments. If there are opportunities to improve shipping accuracy via other systems before it's handed over to UPS, really investigate those charges. Alternatively, find out which are the most frequent offenders with this data and see if you can do that proactively before that's getting charged by UPS. So really a lot of changes that are going on at UPS right now. Again, those charges are set to take place on June 2nd of this year. If you need any help looking into it, Reveel is here to help. We deal with this all the time. If you're looking for an impact assessment of these, that's really where our value can really support you. Now, I want to switch over to FedEx. Like I said, FedEx really followed up UPS on these charges, kind of coming as a secondary player. So what FedEx is updating are the delivery area surcharges. These are also due to take effect on June 2nd. And what's really interesting is that FedEx is building on a trend that occurred last year. So last year, UPS and FedEx made some noise because they expanded the delivery area surcharge, which traditionally has been reserved for rural shipments. They started moving that more and more towards an urban and suburban application. And that's really the call out here. So as FedEx announced the updated list, new zip codes that would be receiving DAS or extended delivery area surcharge, those areas, the ones that are really interesting to me, are going to be Santa Barbara, Bakersfield, California. Those areas are going to be receiving more and more charges. You've got Cape Coral and Naples, Florida, Wilmington, North Carolina, Eugene, Oregon, a few suburbs in Houston. The list goes on and on. So the big call out here is that delivery area surcharge, again, a very common charge that we see with customers, it's expanding in terms of application. Again, this is nothing new for UPS or FedEx. They are just extending the amount of areas where they can apply charges. So my recommendation, if you are a FedEx customer, if you are receiving a lot of delivery area surcharges, I recommend going back to the carrier and negotiating your discounts. Both FedEx and UPS, especially over the last 2 years, have been much more aggressive in the discounting that they are offering on these services. If you are in that case, take a look at your discounts and your surcharges. It would be a good area to negotiate. Again, this is happening outside of your general rate increase. It's something you're going to want to focus in on as a shipper and contractually. So as these lists continue to expand, you have protection, you have coverage. That really rounds out the list. Again, the major call out amongst both carriers is that we are seeing a continued trend towards dynamic pricing. This is not something that is going to go away. I expect it to move more towards a quarterly basis that we see these kinds of changes, whether it's related to fuel, whether it's related to zip codes and DAS, whether it's related to just how they're defining certain surcharges. UPS and FedEx are trying to become much more flexible and much more dynamic in those pricing changes. So really pay attention to those pricing pages, the update pages. Neither carrier is great about messaging these out, whether that's by design, whether that's just by bad practice. who knows? What you can be sure of is that at Reveel, we will be on top of these changes as we go forward. So thanks for tuning in. If you want more detail, feel free to reach out. Stay sharp, and we'll keep you posted on what's happening next. Thanks, everyone.